get made because there's too much or there's too much process or so much engagement that things never move to resolution. That's one of the problems that some communities have seen. And we've really got a great team of advisors with enormous experience. They're some of the best folks in the industry who've done dozens and been responsible for organizing and building dozens of these communities around the country. So our advisors have really been a big voice for us in sharing what kinds of decision making, what kind of design fills your plans to build a community, right? So every design element is built to support the meaning of the project, of living in community and making decisions together. And for example, we have 39 units. We initially started with a little smaller plan and built up to that, but we're capping it at about that size, because one of the things that we know from the experience of other communities is that it gets very difficult to make decisions based on consensus after about the point of 60 or so active adults in a community. You start breaking down the decision-making process. We'll probably have some backup plans like health and safety or emergency decisions that need to be made quickly. If we can't reach consensus, might back up to a majority vote. There are so many philosophies around how we do that. And we're, again, just fleshing out some of the ground rules now, and new members will be helping us shape those decisions. How do we actually institute policies and procedures that support that vision we have for consensus-based decision-making? I talked a little bit about the location. It's really a prime feature of our community. It is really 20 minutes to being in some serious mountains if you head west, and 20 minutes heading east gets you to the city. So it's really a great location chosen specifically so that we could enjoy the benefits of the city and our natural environment. So really excellent for supporting that outdoor natural lifestyle. People like me who've lived in the city of Denver for 30 years have to wrap our head around moving a few blocks to the west, which feels like I'm moving to the boondocks or something, but the location is really just ideal for having an active community lifestyle like we envision. I talked about our common house a little, and we'll go and look at some of the design, but I want you to understand that all of the elements that were planned into it were part of this philosophy that we're developing here. So we have kind of tricked out the common house to be really very nice. And part of that was our advisors, based on our advisors' recommendation that, again, some of the mistakes that communities have made along the way that lead their common amenities not to be used or not to promote community. So there will be times in the design process when some of our members would raise questions about, well, what if we design something this way or that way instead of your recommendation? And they always had some explanation for why you wanted to lay things out in a certain way to drive people together, or how you wanted to create patterns of traffic that create incidental socializing. So these really are some of our advisors, real experts in what has made communities thrive and what experiences have shown to be pitfalls. And we have taken that all into this design and really made a superior common house that's a pretty large part of our community. And it'll include the commercial kitchen, indoor and outdoor dining and gathering opportunities. When it says kids play area with sightlines, the layout in the common house is specifically designed to have big walled windows with a sightline to gathering areas where adults may be, so that kids have their own space, but adults can be nearby, right? So all of the layout and the features were planned to drive people together to the degree you want to, right? Because some of us are also kind of introverted and want to have our own spaces. It's one of in fact, I think there are some statistics I've heard that introverts are more likely to want to live in community, maybe because it makes it so naturally part of your day and to mingle, which is really what all our design is aimed for, bringing us all together, giving us opportunities to spend time together. Some of the values too we had for some of our shared spaces. A lot of us want workout rooms. We've got a pretty good size, I think it's like 1,500 square feet gym with some different studio spaces in the plans. Library for
Brian, you're okay?
We've got arts and crafts. And then the guest suites are something I like to mention as an amenity, because this isn't a tiny house community, right? And it's not a very affordable community, although it is more affordable to live this way than it is to live single. But some of our values are that sustainability. We can downsize our personal spaces, and some of us are planning to do that because we have so many shared common spaces. So the guest suites, for example, we placed 2 guest suites in our common house design, and that's intended so that when members of our community host family members or guests, maybe you're living in a little smaller place than you used to, and you don't need a guest room anymore. But we've got a guest suite available. Maybe we have a small cleaning fee or some policy like that, but they're made available to members of the community to share those spaces as needed, and including to socialize with your folks from outside the community and to host visitors. And it's important to all of us to have some personal outdoor space. So every unit comes with its own patio or area or its own deck space, or for the townhomes, there are small yards in addition to the 3.5 acres that we'll be living on and sharing together. So it's really a nice balance of having some privacy and as well as having community involvement. Again, we would like to see this work as a function of our everyday living is community oriented, and you choose as a member how much you participate or engage, but the opportunities are built into the community the way it's designed. So that includes things like the shared gardens. We have place for more than 20 raised beds. We've got a great landscaper who has designed areas where we envision some of our members choosing to work on those areas. There may be garden maintenance, maybe one of the community tasks we share, maybe that it is contracted out, or maybe there's some blend, but our space is designed knowing that we have and will have more gardeners in our community. That's been one of the big attractions. So there's a lot of land dedicated to that. And then things like the bike barn and a bike shed and a maker's shed has maybe some woodworking tools. And one of the things that you see if you've participated in co-housing is people walk around with these t-shirts that they say things like, why does everybody need their own lawnmower? And those are the kinds of things we talk about in our community as well. When you share, this is why it makes it cheaper to live in community. You don't need your own lawnmowers, right? Everybody shares the amenities. We share responsibility for our common space. Again, whether that's managing it ourselves or contracting some out. But we have places on site where people can share activities and skills. So maybe there's a woodworker who, is giving some lessons to somebody else in the community. Arts and crafts rooms, the bike barns, all of those, again, are made to be communities draws so that people come together. And that's the experience that communities with these kinds of features have found. We're really in a premium spot to spread out and have the good things, like I said. So we're really pursuing this. And we'll look at the design in just a moment so you can actually see all these elements. We have planned this community so far to be garage optional. So there are garages in the design, and they are explicitly located on the perimeters of the community, with parking spots in between that you could, for example, drive in and dump your groceries or your suitcases after a trip and then go park in your garage. But the point of the design, and when you see it, is to create paths where people come together. Part of what breaks us down in our kind of typical American neighborhoods now are the driveways and cars between our homes, right, and our spaces. They become more barriers. And so putting them on the fringes was an intentional part of the design. There will be enough garages for anybody who opts for one. They will be priced out separately from the units. There will also be plenty of outdoor parking spaces available for our guests and for those who don't choose garages. And so that's part of our location, again, is the premium on public transportation and biking, and those things make those garages optional. And then finally, the homes themselves are 6 different types. And for those of you who haven't been to our website, I would suggest spending some time there if this looks like a community you really want to consider, because we have not walled off any of our information. Like some communities will kind of have some information present on the website, and then you kind of have to join and get involved to get more. We've tried to put everything on there, and including all the questions we get at meetings. There's a lengthy FAQ page for all the things that weren't already kind of featured there. And you can get a look at what the types of units will be. The mix are going to be some 1-bedroom carriage houses that are located over garages. There's noise proofing in the design and other elements that are designed to make that still a comfortable home to live in. And one of the questions we get about those is, am I going to hear my garage door every time somebody comes and goes? No, there are a handful because of the way that our architects are planning to build or have designed the build. So there are a half dozen or so of the carriage houses over garages, and those are our most affordable and smallest units. They're about 750 square feet and 1 bedroom. Then we have a couple of 2 bedroom flats or apartments, a 900 square foot planned smaller model and an 1100 square foot slightly larger model. And then the apartment building also includes 3 bedroom apartments that are really nice, actually, and quite large, closer to 2,000 square feet. And all of that information you can kind of get a flavor for on our website as well. Then there's a part of the community that's got townhomes. So there's a big L-shaped building you'll see again as we fly through and look at the design. And then there's some townhomes that we're pairing some smaller 2 bedrooms with next to larger 3 bedrooms, and they have small private yards that are fenced in. Some large dog owners and others are with little kids. Some folks were saying a private yard would be something they would like. So I'm going to stop and suggest that you have questions about the design so far to speak up and let us know or drop them in the chat. And then what I'm going to do is play this video for you, which is a fly through of our community that our architects drew up. This is the actual plan that is now in the final stages. We'll get to that next, of clearing the city approvals and being and getting ready to turn these drawings into the schematics that will go to a builder. The other stage, just to jump ahead just a little so you know what you're looking at, these are the visual plans for the space. They will show, what I'll show you includes the landscaping from the landscape architect, exactly as she's designed it. And all of this is subject to some fine tuning by our members, but this is the master plan as it was designed and as it is clearing the city. What we will be getting to next is the units themselves, the layouts of the apartments, and members will be designing those together. Well, I'll share a little bit about that. But again, drop your questions in the chat as you go, and I may stop this video at points to, let me back it up to the beginning, to show you what you're looking at. So this is going to be an aerial view coming in from like the southwest where the mountainside is. And you'll see, you can see it's kind of laid out a few blocks long. The main street that we're entering here is 44th Avenue, which is a busy thoroughfare right now, but the city's revitalization plan includes slowing the traffic on 44th and rerouting some of that to other avenues. So it will be dropping as a pass-through kind of boulevard in that area, declining. But right now, the common house is placed on 44th, and you can see there's a little bit of patio area. This frontage on 44th is designed partly as an enjoyable area and also as water retention. If the locals might have questions, my first question at a meeting was, where does our water come from? So if you're locals, you may have some sustainability kind of design questions like that. All of the features are suited to our climate and to the microclimate of this area here. So as we come around, you'll see it's an open community. We're going to come into the middle, and you can see how the layout is of these apartment buildings with private spaces and patios, indoor, outdoor gathering. We plan to have a giant movie screen that drops down for movies on the green. A lot of communities find that common house and those common meals and activities become the heart of the community. And then you can see all these little zones. There are like reading nooks here and there. There are play areas tucked in to accommodate different interests in the outdoors that our members may have. So these fictional residents are really enjoying this neighborhood. You can see on the left a little bit of the carriage houses. And then we've got all of these outdoor areas that are just for hanging out there's a fire pit there. I suspect we may have some sing-alongs at times or some picnics, but it's, again, designed to drive people together and create spaces people want to gather. So this row of townhomes leads from the front of the community where the apartment style building is to the back. And this is where a lot of our open space grows. You You see these little yards. Back here are the bike barn and a bike shed that will have tools and things that people need to keep their tools, their bikes operational. We've got a little pool house for our natural biofiltered pool. Want this to be a low chemical pool. Typically, these pools take about chemicals maybe once a year as the season kicks in, and that is designed to biofilter. We've built a beach for enjoying our pool. And then in the back, you'll see this fenced-in area is a dog run. If you're not a local, Denver's a dog town. People love their dogs here. I might be the only member who's, I think there are just a couple of us who aren't big dog owners. And this area is constructed also with the berms and the hills to reduce noise that might come from the freeway. The interstate is about 3/4 of a mile north. There isn't a lot of noise pollution, actually. We've actually had members measure it, but this will help tamp that down as well. And then you see our shared gardens, our garden shed. Here is a ring road that goes through the community, and it is there for specifically because the fire code requires access to the perimeter and the edges of the property. And we've got a design request into our well, the plans call for this to be multi-surface, so that there will be areas that are suitable for children to play with hard surfacing. So the other parts of it will be more porous and allow for some plant growth and things. So again, very purposeful design in all of the elements here. And you can see what we're going through down this part now is the eastern part of that U-shaped road. On the left are garages, and on the right is the apartment building. This is the rear side. The only thing that is not that didn't pass city inspection was a little bit of this overhang here in the building. They're making some final tweaks now and getting those approvals, but this is the visual description of what plan the city has approved. And I'm going to stop it right at this angle because I really like to show you from here. This is looking toward the northwest, if you can orient, if you're familiar with the area at all. And I like to show these patios. They're built-in open spaces, again, near craft rooms or near the workout space. Again, because our philosophy is bring yourself out of your personal space from time to time and mingle with your neighbors, right? By creating attractive spaces that are functional and that people want to spend time in. And then you don't have, we're not interested in compulsory mingling, right? We're interested in having a community where people have spaces that encourage us to naturally be good neighbors to each other. So I'd like to show that as well. It's just a different angle. And you can also see how all the south-facing roofs are covered with solar panels. And at a time, the design created array, we've kind of made some changes over time. But this is mostly common house with some apartments on the upper levels. And then as you move in further to the community is where the residences are. And then this gives you a little more sense of, to the west, the left side of the picture, if it would show the mountains. We are really going to have some nice views, I think, from those upper floors because we're fairly close to the foothills right there. So that is the visual. And I wanted to show that and ask if you have any questions before we move on to a little bit more about status and where we are with the plans. I see
A question came in from Tess. If there's plans for a sauna or a hot tub or a cold plunge, and I hope I didn't overstep my answer, but I said that still could be decided by our members.
It could, and I'm with you. I'm actually I steam and I float. I do all the woo. And so the layout of the kind of workout space in that common house, everything that you saw and that we've been talking about in the design, it's a decision that's been made so far. But the interior, and we have to stick with the general layout, probably 98%. There's little tweaks we can make and still be okay with the city. But we are entering the phase where we're locking down now the plans for building. And so what our architect team is working on is converting these visual plans that help us understand what the community looks like into specs that can be shared with the builder. So they know where the plumbing and where the electricity and what kind of materials and how this translates to the building orders. So we're in that phase now. And what that means is that members still can shape the interiors and details of this plan. So there may be some tweaking, especially within the boundaries of this layout, as we enter the design phase and start locking down the interior spaces, which is kicking off in mid-May. So May 17th, we're going to have our first unit design workshop, and all the members, and we have spots for observing. If you really are seriously considering, we'd encourage you to attend that, and we'll provide some more information to folks on our mailing list. But we're going to actually start designing some of the interior units, the layouts of the apartments and of the common house, and start locking down those details so we can get those building specifications detailed. We haven't done that yet because, again, we wanted to wait until we had more of a critical mass of members who could share the vision to shape that, rather than having a small group that determines what all the spaces look like before the community grows into, really matures. So we are at the point now where we feel we have enough members, and especially as we consult other communities and experts with experience in this, what they tell us is now's the time to start working on your interior design and your community standards. So most co-housing in Colorado operates like an HOA. So it's like living in a condo with your, other neighbors. I like to say I lived in a condo building for 16 years and I really didn't like most of my neighbors. I wasn't really looking to hang out with them or spend time with them. But you know what? We could get together and make decisions for our property, and we could figure things out. And this kind of experience of co-housing is a group of people making decisions together who have committed to doing that with each other, right? And to doing it with the aim of building community. So from my perspective, with my experience, I think, well, this is going to be great. We'll figure out our ways together. We'll shape our community. These are going to be people who have already self-selected to be part of a community that is looking out for each other. So how are we having the good life together? How are we building and spending our life stages together? I guess the bottom line is joining now helps you shape the direction of where things go, both kind of in terms of the material layout and features, but also of those community standards. For example, many communities will have something like a community dinner twice a week. And people are encouraged but not required to attend. You're never required. It's your home. But those kinds of things, the character and the expectations and the activities and the schedules, we have only talked about so far and haven't started fleshing them out to kind of eventually we'll have a system of expectations and agreements that we all have. So that kind of thing, we are just now reaching a point where we want to get more detailed about what it really means to us to live together and form a community. So some of these details, like I said, both for the layout as well as the more touchy-feely stuff, right? That's and the decision making, that's still to be kind of hammered out, and we're going to be doing that together starting soon.
Lisa, a couple of questions have come in, and I know this has come up, and I found out the answer from our developer, but I can't remember what sort of heating cooling is envisioned. So that's they know that, and I'd have to go look up my email to see what Martin replied to me, because I shared that with another potential interested.
Yeah.
And then the electric supply being shared, how's it priced? So you already spoke to that a little bit, but the anticipation is that we'll be self-sustaining from the electricity, and it will be part of our HOA. That's going to be part of what's covered.
Yes. So as an example, yes. So Brian, Brian Bowen is our primary architect of Caddis Design. He is participated in dozens of these and led the design for dozens of these communities and lived himself for 18 years, I think, in co-housing in Boulder. And he has shared with us kind of examples from other communities as well as his own experience. And again, this is like, if you think of like an HOA community or what a condo would be like, it's a lot of it's similar. We may, for example, all contribute a small amount for our electricity and for our internet signal, for example. We're planning on T1 fiber lines hardwired and into the building. We're planning not to tap gas lines, but to have heat pumps and to have induction and electric power. So that's kind of our plan so far. And I think that's, where it's going on that note. The gas lines, by the way, I would say are being phased out in a lot of communities. Not a lot of communities are developing rules that restrict new communities from building. We're not doing it for that reason, but it is a trend that is growing. So just note.
Lisa, another question came in, and this would probably be a good time to, because I know we want to save time for membership, how to become a member, what are next stages. So this will be actually a nice transition. Like,
Yeah.
what does our membership look like now? What do we envision? And then how we see becoming intergenerational community and the typically how co-housing members first come together and then how they find a way to bring in families with the last portion of their units, which is our plan as well.
Yeah, so where we stand right now, I think is in a really nice growth and transition point. We have completed that plan that we just shared the fly through, which you can see on the website, by the way, anytime you want to go take another look at it. We have got we're getting the final end stages approvals from the city, and our team has assured us that there's nothing hanging it up. It was a few tweaks in design. I point out one little, like an overhang they had designed, and the city wanted it to be adjusted. So they characterized it as tweaks, and they've been through a couple of rounds already of feedback with the city. So it's just finishing now, and that's where we start building toward the building. Now, what we're doing a little bit differently than some communities, we were pretty typical compared to, I think, the successful communities from all of the research that we've been doing, the kind of partnering we've been doing out there and consulting with others and going to conferences and meeting with other co-housers. So our experience, I think, is pretty typical. We are relatively low risk plan, and we're on a pretty good track compared to others. But where are we now? We are completed with the big oversight, or what do they call them, the ODP, the overall development plan for the site. We're beginning the design process for the interiors in mid-May. We're recruiting more members, and we need about 15 more households to join to obtain financing for construction. And what this is the kind of pivot point where we are. And I'll just say a little bit more about this. Our community has chosen not to use a developer, which is how folks typically will build these communities. They'll place a co-housing community within an existing development plan, for example, a corner of a new development that's growing. Or they'll tack on, some of the local folks might know of ARIA. That was a developer who was interested in creating some co-housing as part of the overall community design, which was much larger than just the co-housing building. So they're often run by developers, and they're considered part of a larger project. That's how people make them work. We're doing something a little different. We are developing it ourselves, and we have not hired a developer. And what that means is that it's two major points that come out of that. One is that we retain design control as members. So we can really ensure that the way the final buildings is the way they materialize is according to our vision and not to a developer's vision, and there's no profit motive for that developer to suggest alternatives to design components, for example, or to try to keep costs down by subbing materials or whatever it may be. We will make those decisions rather than a developer. What we lose for the developer is somebody who manages that whole project. We do have a project manager, and he is currently preparing all the materials we will need to hire a builder. So we will directly go to a builder. What this lack of a developer does for us cost-wise is tremendous, because typically the home price you pay includes 20 to 25%, 25% of that value is paying the developer's costs and profit. By not hiring a developer, we will move in almost certainly with equity in our homes, because our prices will actually be more the cost of the building the community without a markup for developer profit. So that decision means more work for the members to manage the design process. But it means that, and we have to raise the funds to obtain a construction loan. There's not a developer who's going to put in a big investment and then get some control over the community in exchange for their investment. Instead, the investment is coming from our members. And when we have Our whole project is about $30 million to build. We need to raise about 5 million to get the construction financed. We will do that by raising it through our members, and we are looking for angel investors, people. We've had some nibbles and investors who came around, and we're thinking about maybe committing $1 million or $2 million to our group. That would be wonderful if we can obtain something like that. And we've got folks who are working on those kinds of angles. We've also got folks who are working with some banks, and who are we've got some institutions that may be interested in helping us fund the project, which would mean less of our $5 million-ish to get that loan has to come from the members itself. So that's the process and how we're doing it. It means in the long run, we gain so much by maintaining this, but the hard part is what we're doing right now. And this is the hard part for any community. It's getting the initial members. We have calculated we need about 29 households in our project who have put down what amounts to about a 20% down payment. I'll get to the actual numbers in a moment so you can see it. But by doing that, we come up with that pot of money needed to secure the financing for the rest of the construction. So that's the portion we're in now, recruiting members to get the funding together. Also looking for alternative ways to raise that funding in case we can make it doable with less input from the members. And while that is all going on, we are continuing to move ahead with the land layouts, the researching builders, our project managers doing that for us, preparing those building plans, managing our sessions, and getting ready to work with Cohousing US on an official launch plan. I will go ahead and change the slide now to tell you kind of where that goes, where we go from here. So that's kind of how the whole thing is going to work. So I think I've kind of mentioned this. This is what you get in exchange for being a member, right? You get to help shape the community. You get to participate and be a decision maker, and all of the decisions still to be left shaping that community, which is not what many of us looking for co-housing get. And if this doesn't work out and we end up on a waiting list again, maybe we'll be thinking about it. But this is how we're going to make it work. When you join, right, if you were to join now, this is what we would ask of you: to sign a reservation agreement. We'll send that to you, and it's a $25,000 deposit. If you look on our website, there is a whole schedule of payments, and there's a whole financial spreadsheet of what our unit prices will look like, what the price per square foot is, and it's got a lot of the financial information. You'll also notice right away it's out of date. It's like 2 years old, right? It was prepared by our experts when we were hoping this would be a much shorter process. I will say we have learned since then we are doing fine in terms of how these communities typically build. It feels like a long commitment. Some of our members have been in this project for 5 years, and they started with looking for the land and purchasing the land and obtaining the land, and then they've got us to this point, right? So what do you get? Eventually, and you'll see this on our website too, eventually, what we're asking our members who join now to do is to put down about $178,000. It's like 177.5. It's right in there. And initially, we envisioned that as a schedule of payments over time. And as you joined, the members would decide to make another call for the next, we had a schedule of the next 10,000 or the next 20,000, whatever would come in, so that we would build up over time to our members had committed enough funds to obtain that construction loan as a pool. What you got for that, what you get in for that is, I think we've got 14 members now. The next person who joins is number 15 on the unit selection list. So when the units come open for actually sale or assignment, those members who have reservation agreements, you're reserving your spot in the order to select your actual unit. So you get to join, and I think I'm number 8, for example. I'll be the 8th one who gets to pick my apart. That's kind of how it goes. So you get that, as well as the decision-making process. Without a developer, we are doing this ourselves, and we are making decisions together, and we are managing the work together and hiring and managing our vendors. What happens when we get shovel ready, when we have that construction loan and we're ready to build, is at that point, all of the money that the members have put in converts to like a down payment. It's credited, and this is what the reservation agreement shows you. It's credited to the payment of your home. So it's not an investment. It leads directly to your home, in other words. So you're paying that in advance to help to get the community off the ground. For anybody who joins after we've secured that construction loan down the line, right? It's going to be a regular purchase and sale mortgage agreement, financing a home. So where we are right now is in the tricky part of getting enough investors to secure the construction loan and build the project. It becomes, and this is what every community has experienced and what all our advisors say, we're in the hard part right now. And then once you know the project is going forward, the financing is there, the institutions are ready to finance people to buy it, and it's much easier for people to individually come in and arrange to buy a single home in the community. So we're in the part where we're still building this project, and you can see we've made a whole lot of ground. Here's what protects the investors and makes this actually a really secure way. Our advisors tell us this is about the most secure way you can minimize your risks as investors in the community. And that's because what our founders did, our founding core members, they own the land. There are two LLCs that make Blue Columbine Community. One is the community of all of us members who are planning to live there eventually and are building this. And the other is a small group of the landowners, Blue Columbine landowners. Their agreement in purchasing the land actually requires them to sell it to our community. So they're members of our community, right? They bought it for the purpose of this, but it's handled through a separate investment and a separate LLC. It secures us in this way, and this is what you would see in the reservation agreement. I put down my $25,000, and what it says is, if you individually change your mind, something happens in your life, you can't go through with it, you quit making payments, you're not immediately reimbursed. The reservation agreement, and we've had a couple of people who, in the course of the years that we've been building this community, have, for one reason or another, personally, they've dropped out. Their investment so far is refunded to them after the last unit in the community is sold and it is fully booked, occupied, right? And then any other funds go back to reimbursing those folks who fell out of the project or withdrew from the project. If the project cannot go forward, let's say we can't get enough investors, and a year from now, our members are saying, we're not making enough progress and we want to cut our losses, then what the agreement says is that if this project fails, then the land will be sold within a reasonable time, depending on market conditions, by those owners, and the funds will be sent back to the investing homeowners to reimburse us. So the strength of this is that the founding members did a fantastic job with this location, not only for our community benefits, but because of this whole revitalization plan, other changes in the neighborhood, like a major hospital that just moved in and has 3,000 employees. There are a lot going on in this area of town. The land is already appreciating in value. So we have a pretty, knock on wood, pretty safe way of protecting our investments because it's secured by that land. And the whole agreement that those folks who purchased the land made was it is purchased for the purpose of transforming into our community or reimbursing anybody who has invested in the community if it fails. So we hope that's not what it comes to. But I will say we've met a lot of co-housers. We even have one in our community, Dave, who was part of a community that was for 9 years trying to form and eventually fell apart, and folks lost their investments. And that is unfortunately a pitfall that happens, and we are really structured in a way to avoid that. So this is a pretty unique way that we're doing it. I will say, though, that the group sent me to the co-housing conference last summer and met with forming communities and established advisors, and we went through kind of best practices for marketing and building and pitfalls. And we are such in a good spot. It was really reassuring to me to take it to see that there is a kind of life cycle to these projects. There are many that fail, and there is a growing industry of people and consultants trying to help these projects succeed, and they're really coming up with best practices. We're benefiting from a lot of that knowledge, but our model was really smartly planned. Even our budget on the website needs to be adjusted, but it was designed by Jim Leach, who's called the godfather of co-housing. He is now retired, but he was the expert, and he factored in the life cycle of the project. And at the time he drew the project, it was when lumber prices and construction materials were very expensive under the COVID lockdowns. So we are feeling pretty good that the budget he prepared is still pretty on point, but we are having our advisors work up some firmer numbers. And as we begin this unit design process, we will firm up the numbers for each unit. The general information I've given you about the costs, is what we're looking at. The general information on that website, other than the timing, is correct as well. But that's how the project works.
And Lisa, just to confirm, all the current members have put in 25,000 and there's not been an additional call for more money. We're really waiting for, the rest of our membership and then we build together.
That's right. And that's a really good point. Thanks for raising that, Eva, because as I mentioned, that whole payment schedule that we initially envisioned, that we would be paying up toward this 178,000, we paused it. We decided as a group to pause that last year because we didn't want to get ahead of ourselves and have too much invested without the community growing and producing, right? So we have been able, with the $25,000 that our members have put in so far, we have been spending that as we go on our plans, on our approvals, on the fees, on our experts, on our marketing. And we still have money in the bank. We have not needed to make another call, and we have decided not to make another call of contributions as long as we're keeping up with our payments and until we're growing a little more. We just didn't want our members to feel like we had too much invested too soon. Because we weren't growing as fast. Now we've had some real growth and we're now at this turning point, and I think our momentum is building a lot. But we're keeping up with the expenses that we have with the $25,000 deposits folks are bringing in. So we haven't called anything else yet. And it may be that we are able, we can't promise obviously, but if we are able to finance this without everybody coming up with that 178K, that would be great, right? That's the big barrier to entry for most of us, is coming up with that. On that note, I will say just, it took me some time to do some research. If you're a homeowner now, it's easier to, I did something like I got a HELOC, a home equity line of credit, and that helped me to be able to deposit these funds. I'm happy to talk with folks about how you make it happen. A lot of our members, some of our members were in the position to, kind of contribute, and some of us had to do some legwork and find some funding or some financing, figure out our plans. And so that's kind of where that goes. But if you're looking for ideas or something like that, reach out, because we'll talk about how you make it happen. It is easier, and this is where our community stands kind of in composition so far too. It's a good point to say most of our early investors are near retirement age, or they're homeowners already. They're folks that have had a career or a life that they've been able to build up the savings to buy in, right? So it's a little skewed in that direction. That's really typical in the life cycle of a co-housing community. You get the people who are financially able to join first, and you have to kind of build toward that accessibility, which is what we're hoping for. I will say this too, we will have units left over after we secure, like I said, that construction loan amount. And so it will be easier to finance for people who come later. But right now we need to get the community off the ground by having folks who can contribute to at this level, so we can make this build happen. And we're optimistic, I think, with the momentum we've had lately and the interest and the consistent interest really building. We're hoping to push this forward this year too. And our folks are working with builders they're figuring out who's interested and who's a good fit, and kind of advertising us out there among the folks who would be a good build for us. So we're making progress. What's on your mind for our last few minutes?
I don't think we have any. Let's see if there's any more questions. Do you want to stop sharing your screen? There we go. So anyone can come off of mute. If you have trouble coming off of mute, let me know, because I might have muted a few people when we had some background noise. All right, Okay, what's current best thinking, re the timing for construction and move-in, acknowledging this will likely shift? Yeah, I mean, I think we can answer that.
Yeah, so I will say this, the members have been periodically meeting to decide how much longer to give it, right? We originally had a threshold. We wanted to see progress by last fall. It's more than we had by that point. And we convened as a group and felt there was enough momentum building and progress being made and good things happening that we would extend that. So I think we haven't taken a vote or had a real purposeful discussion among the members lately, but I think everybody's hanging in there this year to see how much more progress we can make, and we're starting to really make some traction. Yeah, Anne?
Well, can I just add one more thing in terms of for move-in? So we think with the units designed, and that'll probably be about a 2-month process. That's actually what we need to go with our realtor to go to MLS. So this is kind of a pre-Zillow, post-Zillow time period. Once we give the realtor everything they need, they will post it on MLS and we'll open up that route. We're also working with the Cohousing Institute. After this week, we'll join their launch party where they actually help us market and access their list of 10,000 members on their newsletter, and we'll go that route. Really, that's our joke between Lisa and I. We don't need 10,000 that's on the co-housing list. We need 15, right? But once we find the rest of ours, we think we're shovel ready by the fall. When we start building, it's waiting for our membership. All the things,
Could be this, yeah.
yeah, for
When that process starts, it's a 12 to 18 month
12 to
process.
18 months for build. That's right. And that's pretty typical.
Right.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice if 2 years from now, we're sitting in the common house, enjoying the spring.
Yeah. Then Anne and Kim both have questions.
And it's fuzzy timing, but I think we're not, I will say we were not, none of us have the appetite to string this out for years. We are just not going to do that. Yeah. Anne?
On the decision making, does each unit have one vote, or does it people with bigger houses or more people in it?
We're
Yeah.
working that out, but that's typically it's per person, right? Because their households are comprised of different combinations of people. So
This is where I'm not sure exactly what Colorado HOA law requires. I know that in the unit, the condo I lived in, for example, it was based on like the size of your unit determined what share of the community you had. And I don't know that that's how we'll do it, if that's required by law or if it's just a household, right? But we are actually hoping that we won't have to vote, like take a vote too much. We call them straw polls usually, and then talk it out, right? We're looking for as much as we can do by consensus. And I expect that once we have our core community really in shape, we're going to invite trainers to come in and help us facilitate how do we work with each other in this way if our commitment is to not have the richest people with the biggest house get the biggest votes. That doesn't we're looking for. How about Kim?
So I was at the meeting about a month ago, and you also mentioned that you're gaining momentum. How many members have you gained, say, this past month, just to get an idea of how fast we're moving?
I think just one, right, in the last month. And then we had a few people at our last meeting actually ask for the agreements, and that's usually the sign. I'm glad you're here, Kim, because you're if I didn't see you here, I was going to say, where were you? But yeah, we've actually getting to the point now where we've had so many followers. We've started for years, for the last couple of years, we've grown this list and people are actively following and joining all the time. And I think you were at the meeting where we had a couple who came in. They hadn't been around in a year and a half, but they saw what things were happening and they came back and they asked for their agreement. And I'll be following up with them. I think they had a disappointing co-housing experience that didn't get off the ground. And they were a little traumatized by that, but they like they like what we've got. So yeah, I think it's when I say momentum, it's definitely relative to where other parts where we've been, and we're really getting it together now and starting to pick up on a regular basis. So since last September, probably 5 of those. Last October, yeah, I think somebody joined just before Eva, and then we've had a few since her. So yeah, we're getting there.
Thank you so much.
Currently realistic estimate of final range of units. So the costs that are laid out on the website are probably pretty close. Again, we're having them fine-tuned now, and the tariffs are probably one of the things that creates some confusion for everybody because about 90% of construction timber comes from Canada. So we don't know yet, but like I said, our expert budget drafter took some market conditions into account and it kind of padded that budget. So we think it's still pretty close, but we're asking them to fine tune that. The one thing I'll draw your attention to on that is it gives a price per square foot. And I think it says like $620. That's higher, the price per square foot than you often pay for in a single family home. But it's because you're not only getting your home, you're getting a share, you own a share of the whole community, right? You own a share of all the common amenities. So the price per foot is probably the closest marker. And as we start nailing down the unit designs, that will allow us to firm up legally what the prices are they're going to go on the market. So right now, that is our best estimate, and we think it's pretty close. And that ranges from, I think, around 500,000 for the carriage houses. And I think the most expensive place is a little over $1 million for the largest apartment or townhome. Most of the prices are going to be around the 700,000-800,000 range. Yeah, but you can look at those numbers. Anne, did you have something else too? Or
Yes, if you decide, when you decide to sell your house, or your family ends up selling your house, does the other community have a say-so on who can buy?
That's a really good question, and the answer is probably. Again, you can't restrict, there are legal limits on how you can restrict a homeowner from selling their home in a community. That's just legal. But one of the things that we've discussed as a group is that there are other communities, including some locally, where the communal feel has really degraded over time, and people are living there like in any other condo, and there are very few people who participate in the community life, and we are trying to learn from their mistakes. So what we will probably, once we have a set of community statements of how we operate and our values and how our decision-making processes work, they become equivalent to what's called CCRs, your covenants, restrictions, your usual rules for living in a HOA, in a condo community. For example, maybe, I mean, some of them are really picky. You can't put pink curtains on the windows or something, right? We're not that kind of community, but they spell out kind of your community obligations and things. We expect payments for, they'll be reflected in that kind of, those statements and those policies and those procedures that will develop for the community. And that's what we're kicking off right after the unit design is more of that. So we don't have something real firm we can give you now on all of these, because we really are going to start shaping them. I will say, from the experience of our members and vendors who have lived in co-housing, Brian, for example, talks about moving out of co-housing a couple years ago and having this great financial shock of how much it takes to live alone. He said he was paying $7 for like super high-speed internet, the community, because it's built into the community and the community can pay for it. And that's part of what you're getting. And he had a very low bill for his electricity, and he had to go buy a lawnmower, right? The joke. But all the things are kind of a shock to the folks who move out of those. But that's how we maintain the community feel, is we have a statement of principles that become like your covenants, your community guidelines that in the process of buying, you would see those before you closed on a deal and know. We might develop an interview process like a lot of communities do to make sure that people aren't moving in who aren't expecting to join a community, right? So there are different ways that communities handle that, but we really want to be, we want to avoid falling into that trap some others have of becoming just another condo complex.
I have a follow-up question on the estimate of 620. Does that include HOA, or would HOA be above that?
HOA would probably be above that, but we're not really sure yet how much above that, right? So because a lot of it goes into the actual construction itself. So once you have it set up, how much is electricity powering the common house? What kind of cost do we have to maintain our property? Those kinds of things. And is there some work share, or, do some of our community members maintain the gardens, for example, because they prefer to do that than to contract it out? I think that's the one I've heard the most, is people saying, we don't need a gardener. I'll take care of everything. I'm not one of those people, but there are some garden lovers. So, those are things to be figured out. But typically I would say, well, I can't say typically what's typical for HOA costs. From what we've heard from other communities in the area, I don't think it's very expensive. I think I was probably paying more in a private setting for, just to live there compared to what we would have in a community, but still TBD.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lisa, do you want to talk about the invitation for observation for non-members to view the design process for the internal units?
May 17th, hold the date. It's a Saturday. We will be gathering in person and Zooming in some of our members who can't be here in person. We do have people traveling in. And actually so we're going to be meeting in person with our architects and we will be designing a few of the most popular units. And what we are asking folks to do is our members sign up for 1 or 2 workshops. We'll have an overall training first, and then we'll break into by units. So some people want to know they want the larger 2-bedroom layout, for example. Maybe people are trying to decide between a 2-bedroom apartment and a 2-bedroom townhouse, and they join both because they want to have input to both. But we'll kind of choose that way, and we'll start building what the members of our existing members of our community already are interested in, right? And layout. Our intention is to probably have something like 1 layout, a couple finishes, or maybe 2 layouts for each type of home. The more standardized the building is, the more affordable it is for all of us to build. But then we want to allow a little choice, individual freedom in that as well. So, but that's starting on May 17th. And if you are not a member, but you're feeling like you're seriously giving us consideration and you'd like to observe our process and see how it works, then we're going to have some observer spots available. So just make sure, if you haven't already, let us know that you're interested in that. Reach out through the website. It goes to Eva and we share, and we'll make sure that you get the details on timing and how to connect. And so you can observe on that. But that's our plan. And then we'll probably be at that meeting also scheduling out the future design workshops. So kick it off, and then we'll have some other dates as well. And we will probably have we may have some hosted over Zoom. There are 1 or 2 of our members who can't make it on the 17th. Final comment that reminded me of is just I wanted to kind of start where we end where we started, which is that some of our members are local and some of our members live other places. Some people have already sold a home in California and moved to Colorado so they can start adjusting, and they're going to be in Blue Columbine. So we have people from all over. And if you're coming to town, if you're visiting, if you're not here, let us know if you'd like to do something like video walk. Or we had a member, one of our members that is based in Houston and wants to retire here in a few years, and she's diehard Blue Columbine, and she spent a lot of time looking for co-housing everywhere. She made a trip just to come look at the location and examine that. So if you're curious about that, you want to know more, reach out to us, and we'll be happy to give you some one-on-one on whatever questions you have. And it's an exciting place to be. If you're into co-housing, come help us grow.
Thank you so much.
Thank all of you for being here. And again, check out our website. We'll try to, we know a few of those sections, especially the financial details, need to be updated, the timeline. But you got the latest right here, and follow our progress and reach out if you're serious. If you want to see that agreement, let us know, and we'll be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good one. Take care.
Bye-bye.